Hey, true believers. Chris Mack coming at you with New Mutants 99. This is the first appearance of Deadpool, Gideon, and Domino, but we kind of find out that that's sort of a cop out as we find in the later pages of X Force. However, this book really entertaining. There are some parts that kind of chap my hide, and we'll get into it. So it opens up, and this is where we first get to see Gideon. And as you can see, full on 90 colors and the extreme muscles that they threw in during this era. Speaking of which, the print date on this was February 1991. And you come to find out later down the road that Gideon is an external, which is one of those, what is it called? Immortal mutants, kind of like Kendra that we went over in the Gambit miniseries. He's part of that, and I think the other one's name is Celine. But yeah, they have their own machinations that they want to do. And, I remember a lot of people bag on the artwork from this time period, but, you look at a lot of the modern flat artwork, and I gotta say, from my personal opinion, I am very pleased with this. Even the vertical 90s style, I kind of wish that they'd bring that back more often because it's just that very cool poster effect. Now, this book is called The Beginning of the End. They say the end of an era. And that has a lot to do with what I meant by this book chaps my hide. So as we get later on into the story, I'll explain. But speaking of which, this is Rob Liefeld doing plot and art, Fabian Nikizia doing the script, Joe Rose in letters, Steve Buccoletto doing the coloring, and Bob Harris was the caretaker, and Tom DeFalco was the beginning, middle, and end. And this is still, I know I've said this several times, but I miss when the creative team made you feel like you were in on the joke, like you're part of the team. Not anybody really does that anymore. And, a lot of people go to social media instead, and that's not really a place you want to waste your time. Anyway, moving on. Gideon has his own machinations of what he wants to do with the DaCostas. What am I talking about? Read the book. But it's kind of what launches the next issue, which we will eventually go into New Mutants 99. We cut back, and at this point, the Xavier Mansion is still in shambles. The New Mutants are living down in the bunker area where the danger room is. And Cable has become the leader of the team. Sam Gerthy is the field leader. And I like how, even though these two can grind one another's gears, they do build one another up. Where Sam's like, "Do you want some help, sir?" And Cable's like, "Stay out of it." And he's like, "Oh, don't mind me. I'm just going to jump in for my own sake then." But once the fight is over, they butt heads a lot. And I believe it's just because Sam and Cable are so much alike. And, Cable praised him saying, "You did well, Sam." And Sam's like, "I don't mean to be rude, sir. But if you ain't noticed, there ain't much of a team left around here." "I've noticed." "Well, what are we going to do about it?" "Not much we can do." So that's kind of the whole premise of this issue. Everything else is kind of, build up. For example, as I was talking about with Gideon, Machinations, and Robert DaCosta. So make sure to read what happens here because it's really heartbreaking. And again, another thing when Sam says that there's not much of a team around here, this is on the heels of the Extinction Agenda, where, Genosha at this time was taking mutants, making them slaves, and it just kind of became this whole fight against that country because people started to see the wrong side of that. And when Genosha kind of goes under, a lot of people stayed behind to help rebuild. There's a lot of not trust. What's the word I'm looking for? Tensions are high. Let's just put it that way. I've not had enough coffee as of yet. So Wolfbane stays behind. Richter and Boom Boom feel helpless. Richter wants to go, and Boom Boom's like, "That's not a good idea." But he's not listening. And again, the very musculature to look of the 90s. I mean, even look at Tabitha here. She's just like swole. And of course, Bart Simpson. But anyway, before any of these type of things can have a resolution, a confrontation, this is where we're introduced to Deadpool. Do not mind the computer locking behind me. And I was like, you're Nathan, right? I'm Deadpool. Pleased to meet you. Mr. Tolliver hired me to find you. And you have. Yep, well, Mr. Tolliver also hired me to kill you. So he says, so when I frost your old mechanical butt, don't take it personally, okay? Now, that's what I miss about Deadpool, and I've said this in other New Mutant and X-Force reviews, is yes, Deadpool's always been a merc with a mouth. He quips a little bit harder than Spider-Man, but he is not the LOL tacos and rainbows and ponies that we see nowadays. You know, he didn't break the fourth wall that much. It wasn't until later down the road. Back in the day, he was just a stone cold assassin. Like in modern comics, if you want to see a more truer version of Deadpool, read the latter half of Gary Duggan's Deadpool. It very much harkened back to this time period. And so we see how resourceful Wade is, because he's able to take down these New Mutants rather quickly, and it takes the entrance of a certain character to finally put an end to the fight. So, Domino, hello, Cable. You called me, I came. And yeah, you can see that she just does not take crap. And I miss when Domino looked like this. Like, her new style's kind of cool, but you know, this is how a lot of people remember her. Now, what I was getting to when I said that this is about putting a team together is here. So Deadpool's, saying, well, what are you doing? And so he's talking about possible candidates for the team. So he's talking about Rusty and Skids, who, if you remember when Cable first came on the scene, they left with the MLF. So spoiler alerts, they joined them. So he's like, not worth it. And then of course, Karma is like, she's not a team player. She has her own agenda. And then Magma, it's like, she's holed up in Nova Roma, the jungle civilization. Powerful, but she's not worth the effort. And then, of course, my favorite, Danielle Moonstar, Mirage. She became a Valkyrie, stayed in Asgard. And then Domino's like, excuse me? Forget it. Forget about it. Not much to work with. So at that point, as you can see, these are characters that Chris Claremont and Louise Simonson created. And they're characters that people cared about. Now, I know I've said this several times, but if you go back, if you have Amazon Prime, watch Chris Claremont's X-Men. And they talk about how in the heyday of Marvel, how everyone got along, well, not got along, but they bounce ideas, and they said it was just fun to go to work. And, they want to basically bounce ideas off one another. Like, hey, I want to help tie into my book. How can I do that? And it wasn't just for the sake of a corporate event. But as the 90s rolled around, Bob Harris, and don't get me wrong, I think Bob Harris is an excellent editor, but he wanted to make the books, he wanted more product, which the law of supply and demand makes sense. So, and this was at the point where they brought in Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, etc., so forth. And Bob Harris was more sympathetic to the artists than the writers. So Louise Simonson would say that, she would put something in her run on New Mutants, and Rob would turn around and change it. But then they interviewed Rob, and he was talking about how, the X-Men was the hot book, but New Mutants was kind of like the forgotten stepchild. So you can kind of see where both ideas started to bang heads, and that's when Louise Simonson went over to DC and did Man of Steel, which is an excellent run, and that's when, about the time that Chris Claremont stepped off the X-Men after, 17 to 20 years in the book. But anyway, I'm not here to bash or anything. I just want to kind of give you guys some insight to what the documentary says, so you can go check it out and get kind of the idea of why I feel like this is why this team was sort of thrown to the side. But with that said, at least at this time, we got seen Richter mature, we got Siren, we got Warpath, we just got some really cool characters. So I can't be too mad, but just the history of how everything everything transpired to how we got the 90s X-Men. It's really interesting, and I highly advise you check it out. And of course, if it wasn't for this book, we wouldn't have our Merc with the Mouth that we all enjoy watching the movies with Ryan Reynolds and whatnot. So I can't be too upset, but just to see that, Doug Ramsey, all those other characters, they started to die off, and the ones we love, like Danny and Shen, just poof, gone. And it's just kind of heartbreaking. So in this book, I kind of have mixed emotions in that regards. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And if you've enjoyed this book, it is still a hot book. So thankfully, I got a reprint for $4, and it has all the original ads. So at least this is a placeholder till I get old and retire and can buy a legit copy. But nonetheless, I'd say support your local comic shop and either try to get an original copy if you have the pockets for it, or just see if they have any more of these reprints, which is really cool. If you've enjoyed this review, we really would appreciate if you take a moment to hit like, share, and subscribe. Helps the club channel more than you can possibly know. And if you wouldn't mind hitting that fancy little Merc bell next to subscribe, that way as we continue to upload content, you guys can come to the channel. And we love talking with y'all and hearing your feedback, as I just said a moment ago, down in the comments or our social media pages, which I'll make sure to leave the links down in the description. So with all that said, thank you so much for stopping by. Hope y'all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, true believers.